Hey, everybody. I figured out how to turn these damn things off. All right, we got them turned off. All right. Lost 3 people and haven't even started. Nice. All right. Zini, Fish and Football, Art Night, Chris. And Dave. How are you all tonight? So we're going to do something a little different tonight. We're not going to get right straight into feeding. We're going to get right straight into me finishing up some pre-live stream maintenance that I was doing. Trying to get ahead of my mushrooms, but alas, too late. So all I've got to do is make sure we get this tank filled without me getting too distracted or lost. We've already drained it, and it is now in the filling process, but I want to get over there and get the glass wipe down while the water's still low. We don't have to worry about splashing or anything like that. I also took a nitrate test just to see what's going on in this tank. And, you know, it's red, but it's not a deep red or anything. And considering how infrequently this tank gets water changed and considering how heavily stocked that tank is, I'm actually kind of surprised the nitrates were so low. $19 months. Holy crap. Robert. All right, let's get in there and get some glass wiped down. This tank usually doesn't have too much real super cruddy stuff on it. It usually comes off pretty easily with just using the polyester batting that I use for my filter material. I do have some of the melamine sponges if I really need them, but again, this tank is generally, you can't see what I'm doing in there. That's better. This tank usually just has regular old green algae and maybe a little bit of cyanobacteria or some of the, the hell's the word I'm looking for? The diatom, the brown algae. And that stuff wipes off really easily, so I should be able to get it all done with just a single pad here. All right, fishies, watch out. Here comes the scary part. I can feel the water in the tank, the fresh water. It's definitely several degrees colder than the water that's currently in there. So I'm going to go bump the temperature up a little bit when I'm done getting the glass wipe down. I sprayed some hydrogen peroxide on some of the stuff that was a little cruddier, some of the leaves of the Anubias and the small power head I have on that end of the tank. I sprayed that down with the hydrogen peroxide. So we'll see if we didn't kill off a little bit of the grunge that's growing on there. It's a little challenging working around all this Anubias, but the upshot is that Anubias is so thick that anything below the Anubias line doesn't really grow too much crud on the glass because it doesn't get enough light. All right, I'm going to call that good. Let me go bump that temperature up a tiny bit before I forget about that. Hey, Mike. All right, that should be plenty warm enough. Ideally, if I can match it close enough to the tank temperature, it's not so that I'm worried about the fish and the temperature shifting by a few degrees. But if I'm 5 degrees low on the temperature in that tank, then the 300-watt heater kicks on and stays on until it comes up to temperature. So if I can just go ahead and put the accurate temperature in there, it saves me a little bit of my electricity bill. And as I found out recently, saving money on the electricity bill saves you a lot of damn money. So overworking my heaters down here is not necessary. All right, let me get some food thrown in here, and then I will get caught up on my comments. I like to sprinkle some directly into the waterfall, and it takes it right underwater and swirls it around. That way all the minnows and non-goldfish fish get a chance at food too. I came in the other morning when I turned the lights on. There's a whole school of those minnows in there. I saw them all swimming together in a group. There's about a dozen of them. It's kind of hard to tell when you just look at the tank like this, but there's actually a whole school of minnows in there. All right, let me see where I was. Thank you, Dade. Let's see, where was I actually? All right. There it was. So it's Zini we have to blame. I am Dandalf. Hey, Fishing Football. Mike said hello already. Oh, plecos are awesome. I like the big ones, the little ones. I was actually shooting some video on my big one. The tank we were just looking at has a pleco in there that's a little over a foot long. And he was up on the glass this morning when I turned the light on, and he just stayed there. So it's kind of a shitty video. It's zoomed in from across the room, and it's got glare on it because I had all the lights on. But I did get some video of a foot-long pleco hanging on that glass. No luck there, Mike. I don't know how you're going to get your geo to stop being a geo. That's what they call them, earth eaters, for a reason. Hey, Steve. Exactly, Chris. Oh yeah, the zebra plecos are very, very expensive. The true zebras. I have some chocolate zebras, and they were, I don't know, about 10 years ago or whenever I got them, they retailed for about $40 a piece. The true zebras for little babies was anywhere between $300 and $500 the last time I looked at the price on the true zebras, which I'm personally not that big of a fan of. Prepping for a trip. Nice. Yeah, I figured that was a facetious question. Mike, you weren't actually asking how to stop them from doing that. You could, Zini showed me a good technique the other day of putting fish in timeout and yelling at them for acting like the fish. That was hilarious. All right, let's move on to the next tank. I'm not going to be spending a lot of time on the feeding and whatnot. I got to keep my eyeball on that tank. I drank 1.2. Well, it was flickering between 1.2 and 1.3, but it looked like it settled on 1.2. So I'm going to call it 1.2 grams of mushrooms that I drank at 7 o'clock. So they're really coming on to me now. And I did bring down all my stuff to make another batch of tea. If anybody wants to see the actual process of how I make my tea, I can do that and make myself a little after hours tea for when the show's over. I swear I got to do this like once a week. Honestly, I could do it every few days. It's getting a film growing on it, but if I wait a solid week to 10 days, it looks like what you just saw, which is getting too grungy to really even see through it. And of course, it's because I have that floodlight right over top of it. And if you don't know what I'm talking about or you're new here, I have a literal floodlight hanging over top of it, and it puts a lot of light on that glass, which in turn puts a lot of algae and growth on that glass. I'm beginning to suspect that the 1 gram of mushrooms that I made into tea last night, I kind of rushed the process. I only let it steep for about 10 minutes before pouring it off. And it wasn't a very powerful effect. So I figured, this being like the last of my mushrooms, I got 6 mushrooms off that last flush. I'm hoping I get 1 or 2 more, but I'm not really expecting them. I just figured they were kind of like weaker mushrooms or something. I think I just didn't soak it long enough because I'm already feeling more off that 1.2 grams, which is, almost the same amount as last night. But this is coming on a little more powerful tonight. Oh, I love the Royal Plecos. Just one more fish. How are you, Annabop? How are you? Yeah, I'm making psilocybin tea tonight, or I drank the psilocybin tea tonight. Not my weird fake mushroom stuff, but the real stuff. All right, I am caught up. If somebody wants to stop sign me, I don't know if there's still shrimp in this tank or not, Ark. I did see one in there not too long ago, which is probably what you're referencing because I'm sure I commented on it the night that I saw it. But I can't say that I have seen any since. That was during a water change when everything was sort of disturbed and moved all around. But I'm looking and I don't see any. I was really surprised to see one back then. It's not like these goldfish have small mouths. Probably ought to do a water change on this tank too. I can see a white spot starting to develop on the side of Wednesday there. I'm not sure what it is, but every time I see it, I do a water change and it goes away. I ought to get on top of doing water changes before I see the white spot on the fish. That would be optimal. All right, let me go dump this out. We're still filling that tank. I've got to remember. I guess there's also a difference between when I'm up and doing stuff and talking to people and, rather than just sitting staring at a Doctor Who video or letting my mind wander or whatever. So the feeling of it makes it feel a lot more intense. I'm definitely pushing the boundaries of what I like to feel like while I'm live. It'll settle in soon enough. Just got to get over that onset part of it. Oh, I didn't even think about that fishing football. My goldfish tank doesn't really have any kind of carbonates in it at all. And I know the goldfish tend to like harder water. So maybe I'll do that when I do a water change. I'll put some carbonates in there, and that'll probably make the tank more comfortable for them. Oh, yeah, Anna, I looked on Amazon, and you're right. They do sell a lot of different bags. And next time I buy bags, I'm going to get like a 5-pack on Amazon. I can get them for like $20 a piece if I buy a bunch of them. Fish dreams. Mushroom therapy might help for pain. I don't know that it would, but it's certainly worth a shot. You'd probably be thinking of something more like a microdose or something. I'm definitely not on a microdose. I do it more for recreational reasons, but I do get a lot of, we'll call them therapeutic effects. Whenever I take mushrooms, it lessens my ADHD, it lessens my anxiety. My depression lifts. It's really good for me. I do enjoy them, but then I also get like benefits afterwards. So yeah, mushrooms. Oh, I couldn't imagine having goldfish in and with soil. Hey, Michael. Things are pretty good here. A little bit more mushrooms, and they'll start to get all wavy and bendy. I'm not quite there yet, but we'll see. I've only ever had one bad trip in my life, and it was on mushrooms, and it was a pretty bad one. But I got right back on that horse the next weekend and went right back at it. And I've done mushrooms more times than I can count in my life, and I only ever had that one bad trip. And again, I say this with confidence. The only reason I had that bad trip was because I ate a lot of mushrooms and I physically ate them. And, the more mushrooms you eat, the more stomach upset and gas and cramps and all that shit you get. And I ate a lot of them. And so I was having a lot of stomach issues. And my whole entire bad trip just focused around my stomach issues. If I'd made tea out of that same amount of mushrooms, I probably would have had a fucking blast. But my stomach was so tore up that that's all I could think about. And then I started thinking I had demons in my stomach, and like it turned into a really bad trip. I was curled up on the couch with a comforter over top of me, and so yeah, that wasn't a good time. But like I said, I got right back on that horse. We're working on feeding the fish now, Michael. Eugene. We're moving on to that tank here in just a moment. I'm finishing off the water change that we're doing in there. And we'll go ahead and feed it after the water change is done. I guess we can feed it while the water's flowing in. I don't know if the fish are going to be chilled out enough to eat under the circumstances, but even if I finished off the water change, that's not going to, impact whether they're going to chill out and behave normally for the next half an hour or so. So I got to throw food in there one way or the other. Let's just do it. And we can watch this tank till it's full. That way I won't walk out of the room and forget about it. Actually, let me set this down. I want to show you this before we get started on the tank. Look at the way those silver dollars just pack in there like sardines, all stacked up, hiding. Looks like a little school of piranhas hiding in the bushes, waiting to pounce on an unsuspecting cow that wanders down into the water, because you know how much fish love eating cows, especially their hearts. Tear them fucking things right out of them. All right. I'm not going to bother with the little stuff. We'll just go with some wafers. Nobody's going to come out to eat them, but that's all right. They'll be in the tank. Oh, my jewel cichlid came out and put one in his mouth and spit it back out. I don't know what he's waiting for. They might start working their way out once they smell the food in the tank or taste it or whatever fish do. Let me go put my hydrogen peroxide away so I don't forget that. All right. And if anybody wants to guess my music tonight, I left a clue right on the first part of the chat. I'll just say I was walking on gilded splinters right before we went live. Yeah, I remember my acid days. Oh, that would suck having to go work with your dad. I got stuck with my parents one time doing acid when, you know, acid is just such a long-lived drug and it's so intense. You know, I wanted to be away from the house as long as possible. So after school, I would run home, I would do some dishes, you know, do a couple chores, and then I could go out for the evening. And of course, I didn't have to be home till like 10 o'clock or something. And that would give me, you know, 6 hours or something. So I'd still be tripping when I got home, but I'd be over the worst of it, you know. And so what I did on this particular day, I figured the earlier I start, the better. So I took the acid on the way home from school on the school bus, figuring I'll get home, I'll get my chores done, I'll get out of the house, and right as I'm leaving, you know, the acid will be kicking in and I'll get the maximum amount of time to enjoy the acid rather than waiting until I leave the house and then taking it and waiting an hour, you know. Well, I got home and I find out I had done something at school that day and the school had called, and so I was grounded. You're home all night. I was like, oh shit. And it was a really, really strong dose of acid too. And I had to spend the whole fucking night in the house with you know, my mom and dad, like watching TV in the fucking family room, like tripping balls. That was not a good night. I did a lot of dumb shit like that because I know, you know, where are you going to do acid when you're 15 years old? You know, you don't have your own place or anything. You've either got to go somewhere for 18 hours, you know, or 15 hours or something, or you got to deal with tripping around people. I used to trip in high school all the time. I would take the acid when I would leave the house in the morning, and it would start kicking in right as I got to homeroom, and I would just spend the whole day tripping. I don't recommend it. That wasn't actually, you know, necessarily a good time. All right, let me see. Do piranhas eat cow? No, they don't. The piranhas would eat a cow if it died and fell in the water, but piranhas don't viciously attack, you know, anything that wanders into the water like you see in the movies. Well, yeah, like I say, if they don't eat right now, you know, the algae wafers are still in the tank. When they settle down in an hour, they'll be able to go out and get them. Some of the mushroom chocolate from the treehouse. No, that stuff is like completely runs its course within 6 hours, and it doesn't keep you awake. And so if you're still on the tail end of it and you got to go to bed at 10 o'clock, you know, or 9:30 or something. I've gone to bed on that stuff plenty of times. Frankly, I can go to bed on real psilocybin mushrooms. I went to bed tripping last night. I kind of enjoy lying there, like drifting off and letting my mind wander. I got Doctor Who playing, half thinking about that. And next thing I know, it's morning. You know, it's just a pleasant way to drift off to sleep. Surely 14 months. My only dinosaur. No, not CCR, actually. Yeah, I definitely don't like the no, not walking on sunshine. Walking on gilded splinters. If you Google "Walk on Gilded Splinters," that's the name of the song. And the reason I was listening to that song, I actually listened to several songs by this guy. It was after I drank my mushroom tea and the mushrooms were starting to roll onto me. I actually started with Three Dog Night tonight. I was grooving on some Three Dog Night for a little while. And then as the mushrooms started kicking in, I switched over to the Night Tripper. He doesn't do psychedelic music, but his nickname was always forever. He was the Night Tripper. So if you look up the Night Tripper, you will probably find his name too. But I thought that was appropriate for tonight. Nah, I'm good on the tank. I appreciate the warning. You had scared me for a minute. I was gonna say, I swear I just checked it. It's just now just past the lip, so we're gonna let it fill up another quarter of an inch, half an inch, but we're pretty much there. Sniffing butane. Never did sniffing butane. I sniffed a lot of shit when I was a teenager, spray paint and glue and solvents and shit like that. But I never did propane. I didn't even know you could do that, or butane rather. All right, somebody can stop sign me. I'm going to go switch off the water. We're going to call that done. Successfully completed my water change. Well, let's not say that till we get the filter and everything turned back on. But that should only take a moment. First, let's get the hose out of the room. That way I won't look at it and have a half a heart attack because I think it's still running. I've done that too many times. Go and turn the water off and then just leave the hose sit there while I chat for a minute. And then I forget that the hose is just sitting there. And I look up and realize, oh, shit. So let's just get that out of the way now. When you have an ADHD brain, you learn to sort of compensate and do things in such a way that make your life less stressful. So first things first, get the power head back here turned back on. I did want to mention it's you know, you're not going to be able to see it, so it's not that interesting. But I found it interesting as the water was draining in this tank. I have a large power head down here in the bottom. And when the water was down to about here, like 6 inches above the power head, I had turned the filter off and everything. So the only movement was coming from that power head. And when I looked in at the top, at the surface of the water, there was a tiny little whirlpool forming because of the water movement coming off of that power head. And again, it was a solid 6 inches of water above that power head, and it was still starting to create a little whirlpool above it. I was surprised by that. Hang on, let me see if I can get this tightened up. What that's going to have to do for now. All right. Filter is flowing. Power heads are on. Tank is done. Moving on. Have a look at my 40 breeder here. And this tank is filterless. I've got a small power head in the back moving a little bit of water around, and I have an air stone in there. And then I have an even smaller power head in this corner. I have a power head with an air stone in the far corner that you can't see. And if you look very closely in the back corner where you are looking, you can see a small power head back there. So I do have circulation and water moving around in the tank a little bit, but there's no filtration on it other than that. All right, let's see where I was. Thank you, Shirley. Thank you, Dade, Eugene. All right, let's see. All right, I'm caught up. I don't know whether you guys are just funning with each other about the aggressive silver dollars, like the way I always talk about, my discus destroying cattle when they come into the water or stuff like that, because I'm just joking. If you're serious about silver dollars being aggressive, then I don't know what kind of silver dollars you guys have, but I've got 2 different species of silver dollars, and they are amongst my most skittish fish I've got. They're afraid of every damn thing. So I don't know how they qualify as aggressive. But I'm also on mushrooms, so I don't know what the hell you guys are talking about. The tank we're looking at now has Eco Complete from Carib Sea in there. It's a planted substrate. I really like it a lot. It's bimodal, so it has like a black sort of sandy texture to it, but it also has a heavier, more granular, like loose gravel. And the idea is it sort of self-segregates, and the heavier, sandier stuff works its way to the bottom, and the lighter, larger, more porous pieces work their way to the surface. And that gives your roots something to sort of grab onto, the dense, sandy substrate. And then the top part of the substrate allows water flow and aeration and helps with the biological aspect of your tank, etc. And I think it looks really great. I'm a fan of the black substrate, or a darker substrate. It doesn't have to be black, but I like a darker substrate. Yeah, 15-inch silver dollar would be awesome looking. You're getting up into like Peku territory at that point. I like the little spotted ones too. I think they're cool, but my favorite is just that big, dominant. I don't know whether it's male or female, but it's big and thick. It's just huge. I never ever imagined that my PetSmart silver dollars. I think I paid $3.50 a piece for them or something. Never imagined they were going to get the size that they are. That one in there is the size of a damn. It's somewhere between a tea saucer and a small dinner plate. But if you laid it on a tea saucer, fins not even counting the fins, the body from the lip to the where the tail begins would be hanging over the sides of a tea saucer. I think it's huge. Yeah, I might still have a few bleeding heart tetras in that tank. I honestly don't pay that much attention. I just kind of feed the fish and look at them and whatnot. I don't count them or pay a lot of attention to who's still in there. Or I seem to be missing one of these or missing one of those. My tanks just kind of roll on as long as everything's going well. Remember when my snakeskin gourami died? That's a pretty prominent fish in a big tank. It was a 10-inch long fish. When that one died, I didn't even notice it was dead until I started having issues with that tank because there was a huge dead rotting fish in there. Never occurred to me that he was missing. I'm not really good at like seeing the thing that's not there. Like if it's not there, I can't see it. So out of sight, out of mind, Yeah, bucktooth tetras are terrifying. It depends on the species of gourami. Some are aggressive, some are really, really docile. I'm not a fan of sand one way or the other, whether it's black or pool sand. I've used play sand. I've never used the pool sand. Pool sand's really fine. Play sand is pretty fine, and it's too fine for my taste. I just don't like the way the sand kicks up and swirls around, and it gets sucked up into the filter unless you're really careful, or you put a pre-filter sponge on it, which I don't like doing. Kind of defeats the purpose. The filter's supposed to suck things in out of the tank. I just don't want the substrate to get sucked in out of the tank. And with sand, especially the fine sand, even small fish can kick that up, and it swirls surprisingly far up into the water column before it settles back down, especially if you've got, like my tanks, I've got water flow and current and stuff in there. And sand is just problematic. I don't like it. The sand that's with the Eco Complete is larger grain, and it's almost like a volcanic glass or something. It's really heavy, dense stuff. It doesn't kick up or swirl around very much. But having said that, they do make just black sand. It's like Tahitian beach sand or something like that. And I've tried that before because it's the same brand. It's the same, stuff that's for your planted tank and everything. And I thought it would look nice to have like just a black sand tank. And that was actually in my gourami tank, which is what we're going to look at next. And if you pay really close attention to the substrate, you'll notice that it is the same sort of Eco-Complete mixture of sand and gravel, but there's a lot more sand to gravel. This is the tank that I had the black sand in, and eventually it was just I don't like all this sand, and so I mixed a bunch of Eco-Complete regular stuff with it with the gravel, and so this is sort of like Eco-Complete with extra sand in the tank you're going to be looking at next after the one you're currently viewing. All right, I'm going to take a breath and smoke this joint, or at least light this joint, see what happens from there. And I do know what I'm smoking tonight. I got some Super Silver Haze, my plant that's almost ready to come down. I cut the bottom branch off yesterday and have just been slowly drying that out in my dehydrator. So it's dry enough to roll joints out of, but it's not cured. So it doesn't exactly taste delicious, but it's a really nice buzz. And apparently there was a seed in one of the buds, because I've smoked 2 joints now that have had seeds in them, or at least ground up bits of seed. I did have one the other day that popped and blew ashes into my eye. I haven't had a fucking joint blow up on me, and since I was a teenager, I don't think, or since I was in my 20s, maybe, still smoking that shit weed. But then yesterday and then today, when I smoked a joint, I could just like my joint started like dumping smoke off the side of it. And when I did the hit, I was like, you taste that fucking seed in there. So my plants will occasionally self-seed, or buds will have an occasional odd seed in here or there. So one of these must have had one or more. It scared the shit out of me when my joint exploded yesterday. How long has it been since somebody had a joint blow up on them because of a seed? You probably have to be an older person like me to even remember the days when you had a joint blow up on you because the seeds rolled up in it. Yes, mosquito fish are like guppies that have been through the washing machine. All the colors drained out of them. It's kind of there in essence. If you look at them really closely in the sun, you can see glints of blue and some colors in them, but they're pretty drab and subdued. Otherwise, they look and behave pretty much exactly like guppies in my experience. You can just think of them as like a wild guppy. Basically, they're live bears. They're very, very sexually aggressive. They can be fin nippers, but otherwise they're just fun little fish to watch swim around and wiggle and whatnot, because again, they're just kind of like guppies. Yeah, I got a renewal on my OnlyFans. All right, let me see where I was. Another ninja pops in and out every now and again. He's been around for years and years. Won't hear from him for months, and then he pops in and hangs out for a live stream or two, and then I won't hear from him again forever. The Exodons, the bucktooth, they would fuck up any fish, dude. What the bucktooth tetras do to a fish in the tank is what the movies show piranhas doing to cows in the river. They will just it's a feeding frenzy. They just attack and swarm whatever fish they're going after. But they're scale eaters, and so if you've got a puffer, I don't know if they would go after a puffer because they don't have any scales on them, or at least not the kind of scales that these go after. But I watched them throw a goldfish into a tank one time, a feeder fish. I had to walk away, dude. I couldn't watch. It was fucking brutal. I've never seen shit like that before in my life. It was amazing watching these fish just absolutely feeding frenzy on this poor goldfish that was trying desperately to get away and was just being devoured alive. Except it was just having its scales scraped off. It was just being stripped of its scales. Brutal fish. It was not pleasant to see. Oh, you can put mosquito fish with platies. Yeah, they're practically cousins. Oh, I know it's just nature, but you know, I don't doesn't mean it's pleasant to watch. A corpse rotting in the sun is natural, but I don't want to see it. Oh, I see what you're saying. I thought it was you were doing the matchup of like who would win showdown kind of style. You're talking creating you're talking about creating a dark side dyad. Oh, Star Wars, what's happened to you? Tips for keeping the discus in a 40 breeder. I've got a couple discus in my 40 breeder. Ultimately, I think it's a small tank, but I was kind of in a pinch. I didn't really have any place to put it. I wouldn't recommend putting them in a 40. I would say probably a 55 is the smallest you want to put a discus in. Having said that, if you've got a small young discus and you've got a year or two to play with, that's fine. You know, they don't need to start in a 55. But by the time they're full grown, most species of discus can get a lot larger than you'd think. Even a 6 or 7 inch discus, which is pretty small by discus standards, you know, that's a lot of fish for a 40. And so someday I will have to be making new accommodations for the ones I have in my 40. But I also keep the temperature low. I don't feed them a lot. I'm deliberately trying to keep them, you know, smaller as they grow. And they've been in there for a couple of years now, and they're still in there, and there's still plenty of room for them. The problem with my discus and my 40 is who's in the tank with them. I think if they were in there by themselves, they'd be a lot happier. But I've got some minnows in that tank, and the minnows are all darting and dashing. They act like Danios, you know, very frantic. And I think it just spooks the discus. It always keeps them on edge. That empty nest syndrome. We had acceptable weather today. I got some spraying done. I took care of some of my customers at work. And when I got home, I still had enough light left that I did a little bit of light leaf blowing. I cleared out the back area and some of the stuff under the bushes. Our trees are mostly done. And a lot of the lawn area, what you would call a lawn in a normal house, I live in the woods, so it's moss. Most of that is all, you know, the wind has blown the leaves away. but it's blown it all down up against the house and under my bushes. And so I still got to get out and do that final leaf blowing. That's going to be like a half a day job of blowing out all the garden beds and blowing all the stuff up out of the hedgerow. And, so I've been putting that one off. Tomorrow's supposed to be reasonable, but it's going to be overcast all day. And then I think Sunday's supposed to be really windy. So I'll do it when it's a decent day. All right. Oh, you compare discus and angelfish. I've kept discus and angelfish together on multiple occasions with several different angelfish, with several different discus, and none of them have ever had any kind of problem. Tons of people told me not to do that early on, and if you look it up, you'll often see it recommended not to do that. Oh, you shouldn't. I've never had a problem with it. They fucking ignore each other, or they behave like any fish behaves. They might shove and elbow a little bit here and there. Um, Whatever. I've never had an issue with pairing those two together. Yeah, that Raphael's a good one. I'm not sure what the perfect answer was, but I'm glad you got it. Well, I keep rainbow fish with my other discus, and they seem to be fine. Active fish aren't a problem because you can see I got these skirt tetras in here, and that discus is not all skittish and afraid. The minnows I have, and there used to be a lot more. It's down to 3, but there was more than that in there. They're more like Danios, and if you're familiar with Danios, I got Danios one time. I don't know if it was the zebra or the giant ones, but I got Danios one time early in my fish keeping, experience, well over a decade ago, and I fucking took them back to the store the next day. They were absolutely frantic in the tank. They frazzled me looking at them. I know some people enjoy it, and that's great. I'm glad they do. They're a very popular fish. A lot of people love the activity. They're constantly darting and chasing each other around. But to me, it was like frantic behavior. They constantly swam like Satan was chasing them. Um, it made me feel frazzled looking at the fish tank, and that's not what I want to feel when I'm looking at a fish tank. I want to feel a sense of peace and calm, and and then like no, I was just done. I took the Danios back to the store, and I've never had Danios since then. These minnows remind me of that kind of behavior. They are just constantly darting and dashing and chasing each other. It's very frantic. For whatever reason, the discus in this tank just hide all the time. Who knows? Maybe if I put a school of black skirt tetras in there, like as a dither fish, maybe that would ease their stress or something. I don't know, but they definitely don't seem to like these minnows. But as I keep saying, you can easily keep discus in a community tank. I think they're awesome community fish. Oh, I bet an albino yo-yo will be beautiful. Yeah, that's true enough, Zini. That red-tailed loach comes out every once in a blue moon. Sometimes you'll see it swimming around in the back a little bit, or it'll sort of rise up and come up above that rock it hides behind. Every now and again, what did Anita just get herself? Every now and again, it will come out and swim around like to the front of the tank. It'll like dash out really quick and snatch up some food, and then it'll zip back into the back of the tank. It's been like that ever since I've had it. That fish is over 10 years old. It's almost as old as the striped Raphael there, which is the striped Raphael, I think, is a little more than 12 now. So that loach is 11, maybe. And all the years I've had it, like what you're seeing of it now is all I've ever seen of it in the entire time I've had that fish. Never get another one of them. they're not a gregarious loach, meaning that they don't like companionship. They're not friendly. They don't want to be around other loaches. Most loaches are. Most loaches, like the loaches you see chasing each other around, swimming around in the tank, um, they like being in groups. They do that all the time. And you can mix yo-yos with Angelicus and the skunk loaches in there, and they all swim around and interact. That red tail loach says "fuck all you assholes," and it just hides under a tree all day. It wants nothing to do with anybody. It's just not a gregarious fish at all. I should name him Zini. All right. Never had Bosmani rainbow fish, but I would assume that they would get along fine with the tetras. I can't see why that would be a problem. Ooh, a red Oscar. That sounds awesome. Nebula is a cool name, too. Yeah, I've always looked at Oscars. When I first started keeping fish and I didn't know anything about any kind of fish, and I would just go through, the Petco, catalog online and just look at all the different fish and see how big they got and what their tank needs were. Just trying to figure out which one of these awesome fish can I keep and, have, and which ones are too big for my tanks. And I always I knew I couldn't keep the Oscars after reading about them once or twice. At the time, I had a 29-gallon tank, and that was it. But I always used to go back and just look at those Oscars. I always looked at the tiger Oscars. I just thought they were such amazing looking fish. And from the stories I've heard from countless people over the years, they're awesome fish. Apparently, they can be almost as trainable like as a puppy dog, and they come and greet you and eat out of your hand. And I've just heard a lot of positive stuff about Oscars. So hopefully, Anita will have a good time and have an awesome fish out of that. That sounds exciting. All right, the only thing we got in this tank is the angelfish, which is just a random angelfish I got from PetSmart. I thought it was beautiful, so I brought it home. I have one red-blue Colombian tetra, and I have 5 striated bodia. And I think I still have a clown pleco in this tank. I haven't seen the clown pleco in a long time, but I have no reason to believe it's not in the tank, seeing how scraped clean all the rocks and everything are. So I'm assuming I still have a clown pleco in here too. So we deduct that zebras are the opposite of snails. Did we? Yeah, I like the Odessa barbs too. One day I'll get them. Gregarious just means outgoing, friendly. You want to be in a group of people. You want to be around others like yourself. I was gonna say I'll look it up, but I'll have to get my phone because my computer still defaults to fucking Yahoo, that piece of garbage search engine. You see what the actual definition of gregarious is. Primarily means enjoying the company of others or sociable. Is used to describe people who are outgoing, friendly, and prefer being in groups rather than being alone. Pretty much everything I just said. So who needs AI when you've got a brain like mine? I walk around with the this, ultimate suppository of knowledge and wisdom. That's me. Bumblebee Oscar, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. Excuse me. I don't know which ones I had because I didn't have them long enough to let them grow up. That's why I was saying I should name my red-tailed loach Zini. He's not gregarious. Iceman! I do love me some bumblebee gobies. I used to get them, but they're really short-lived. Oh, zebra danios. That's what you're talking about, Mike. I got you. Yeah, school like of 1,000 of them in a tank. That would be pretty amazing looking. Not sure I'd want that to be my tank, but it would be neat to look at. All right, this is my 40 breeder I was just talking about, and as you can see, the discus are nowhere to be found. They usually hide in this cave back here or over there underneath of the plants and stuff in the back. So all I got is those two discus and a few. If you can see these little fish up at the surface, those are gambusia. And then you can see the minnows I was talking about darting around. The larger fish down here, those minnows. I don't know what species they are. I was never able to identify them. They're just something I caught out at the reservoir one day. Got you a tiny bong. Nice. Yeah, that's an old one there, Eugene. Complete set of encyclopedias, never been used. Goddamn wife knows everything. Yeah, I was going to say, where we are, you don't have to say bong anymore. You can talk about weed and growing your own. And like, it's, I actually had a conversation with the guy at the head shop, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago or something. I was just talking about, I said a bowl or a bong or something like that. And I stopped and I was like, I remember back when, I'd get kicked out of a place like this if I used the word bong. And he started laughing. He said, I remember when I would have kicked you out of here if you said the word bong. But we don't have to worry about that anymore, do we? Now, I had a light back in the day that did the thunder and lightning shit. It freaked the fish out, and I found out pretty quickly that like bright flashing lights are not good for fish, and so I never used it. Plus, I didn't particularly like it. The hiding discus, yeah, these discus definitely hide. We'll move on to the final tank here because I'm ready to start sitting down soon. Nice corn dog. Can you believe it? I finally finished that motherfucker. Yeah, there's a lot of hair algae in this tank. Well, you probably should, Art. Yeah, I used to have all those fancy lights that did all that stuff. I'm a simple person, and you can laugh if you want when I say that. I say that in a lot of different ways, but not only are my tastes fairly simple, I like to think of myself as a simple person. I see things for what they are, and I may not like something, but I can accept it, and I like the more simple solutions to problems. Things don't always have to be fucking complicated. Subtle, nuanced, yes, but they don't have to be complicated. Um, but my tastes are also fairly simple. I want a light that comes on when I turn the switch on, maybe have a dimmer on it so I can adjust it a little bit, and then I want it to go off when I turn the switch off. I don't need it to fucking make lightning noises and mimic a sunrise and sunset and be synced with my phone so I know where the light is at all. You know, like I just don't need all that shit. Our washing machine finally took a shit. I spent $40 fixing the suspension because I thought maybe the suspension was broken. Of course, all four of the springs were perfectly good, but I replaced them anyway just in case. And of course, it still doesn't work. So we're not investing any more time or money into that old machine, and we're looking at new ones. And the two that we've just, we're deciding between, they're both made by LG, and they both have an AI mode on them. Why the fuck does my washing machine have an AI mode? I think my current washing machine, let me go look at it because I can't remember what it's called. But it has a, let's see. No, it doesn't. Oh, it's my dryer that has an auto sensing, and that just has a moisture sensor. That's what I was thinking of. I knew one of my machines had some sort of automatic thing. I was thinking it was the washing machine. Like, I'm assuming an AI on the washing machine is you just throw your dirty clothes in there, and then you tell the fucking washing machine to figure out, what cycle to use and how dirty are they for how long to wash it, and it figures out your laundry for you or something. I guess I don't have any idea. I can't ever imagine ever using the AI mode on my fucking washing machine. Come down in the morning, it's self-aware, tries to strangle you with its cord. Fuck that. Bob. Yeah, I was gonna say Bing Bong saying something like that in a Chinese restaurant. I think that kind of speaks for itself. I have been asked about why I don't have timers. Actually, you know what? Now that we're looking at this tank, let me throw some food at them. But I've been asked about the timers thing a bunch of times, and my main answer is that not having a timer, honestly, it forces me to get up every day. It forces me to maintain some kind of semblance of a schedule because I have to come down and turn the lights out at night. Um, if it was just set up on, I'd fucking forget to come in here and feed these fish if I didn't have to come in, and do fish stuff in here. If the lights came on and went off by themselves or whatever, there would be days that I wouldn't even think about my tanks. I know that sounds weird, but with my ADHD brain and like it wouldn't work for me. So having to turn the lights on every day and off every night helps me. It's again, it's one of the things I do because I know how my brain works, and I need that kind of bare minimum of a structure in my day to help stay functional. And so, for that simple reason alone, I don't put a timer on my tanks. But I also don't turn the lights on and off the same time every day. On the nights that I do live streams, I usually wait till 11. Normally, I come down at 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. I do a 12-hour cycle. But on my live stream days, I'll turn the fish lights on at 11 or 11:30 because my live streams often go late and I don't, get out of here on midnight sometimes. And so those days I will switch up, and I don't always know when I'm doing live streams. And so it's easier for me to just maintain the lights. I have three switches I have to hit, and it turns all the entire room is on in three switches. So it's not like I got to go around from tank to tank and adjust the lighting and all that kind of stuff. Well, technically it's four because I have a spotlight that I turn on facing the ceiling, and I turn that on first, and it kind of lights the room up because this is a basement. It's dark even in the middle of the day. I don't get outside light coming in here. So I don't just pow turn the lights on the fish. I turn that light on first, and it kind of gets the room lit up. And I walk around a little bit. I say good morning. Or say something, just to get my voice in here, and they can kind of tell it's time to start waking up and moving. Fish's eyes don't adjust to light the same way ours do, and it can be pretty rough on them to have lights just come on suddenly. Our eyes are regulated with a pupil that rapidly constricts or dilates as we need to light, like the shutter on a camera lets more or less light in for exposure reasons. Fish's eyes don't do that. The way their eyes work is, I can never remember whether it's like the rods or the cones or whichever one it is, but one of those is good at dark light, or low light, and the other one is better for bright light. And so when the fish go through the slow period of evening and the sunset and everything gradually getting darker, their eyes slowly adjust to the darkness by the more low light sensing cells actually rise to the surface or sort of protrude on the back of their eyeballs, and their bright light cells sort of recess at the same time. And so they just sort of move position. So when you just blam, you turn the lights on, they don't have, their eyes can't just immediately squint down and block all that light out. So those low light cells are just being flooded with all that bright aquarium light. And it takes about 20 minutes for their eyes to sort of shift over to the full daylight. Now, I don't come in here and turn the light on for 20 minutes. But I get everybody ready, and they know. And of course, all the goldfish immediately swim to the other end of the tank, and they go underneath the island. All the other fish sort of nestle down and settle into the bushes. And so they're prepared when the lights come on. It doesn't freak them out, and it's not hurting their eyes like that or whatever. So technically, there are 4 lights that I have to turn on when I do my whole morning routine. All right, I'm going to take another breath, and then I'm going to come sit down here in a minute. Figure out where the hell I was. I do have a couple of mosquito fish in my 40 breeder. Yeah, I could see that too. There's been times where I've come in. All right, everybody, here I come. There's been times where I've come in at night to turn the lights off, and it was only then that I realized that I never fed everybody. So people always ask me, do your fish ever get a fast day? And the honest answer is yes, they do. It doesn't happen often, but they do get a fast day from time to time. But it is only because I forgot to feed them, not because of any deliberate reason that I think they should go a day without food. I've never really understood that. I don't think it hurts them necessarily. I just don't understand what the benefit of the giving fish a fast day is. All right. Everything's done, settled down. I can chillax at this point. Oh, it's after 9 o'clock. Did anybody want to see the way I make my mushroom juice or my mushroom tea? Let's see where I was. Morning. How are you doing? Yeah, I wish a washing machine. For the cost of the money we're spending on it, it better. All right. Fish at the fish store are kept in really small tanks, usually in high concentrations.
and they're not home, and so they're not going to behave the way they would if they were in their living environment. You put them in your tank, and after a week or two, that's where they live, and they're going to start behaving differently, and they're going to maybe claim a territory and become aggressive towards other fish. um, you know how with African cichlids, the idea is you have so many African cichlids in the same tank that none of them ever really establish a territory. They all just kind of swim around. It's the same principle. That's almost like a stock tank. It's one of the reasons I was never a huge fan of the African cichlid tanks. As pretty as it is looking at all those fish swimming around, it just looks like a stock tank. It looks like just a fucking tank full of fish just randomly swimming back and forth. I like to see fish that move in and out of the plants and hide in their cave. And, I want to see a fish behaving like a normal fish would behave in the wild. And when you pack 30 of them in a small tank, none of them do. They just all swim around and mill about. It's not normal behavior. Think about a bunch of people trapped in a jail cell together. They're not going to behave the same as they would if they were home in a neighborhood. So that's why they don't behave the same. Oh, you're welcome, Michael. Make some cat juice. I actually let Squeaker out right before I came down. I thought about someone was going to ask about him tonight, but in the warmer weather, he's usually out. He comes in and then he eats and then he goes back out, kind of cat. When the weather starts getting cold, or if it was a rainy night or something like that, he'd be much more likely to be in here. TK, how are you? Well, thank you, Fish Dreams. I've never had any flue ball lighting. I don't have any really. I don't have any lighting in my tanks that is any kind of name brand or anything fancy. The only lights I have in my aquarium that are actually aquarium lights are in my 29 over here. When I bought this, it was like a $75 starter kit from Walmart, and the light had little LED lights in it, or the lid had little LED lights in it. So technically those are aquarium lights because they fit into that hood and everything. But all my other lights are just lights I've bought. They're usually shop lights, or you see I use a lot of these floodlights. I got a big ass LED. That's a marijuana grow light, or I guess you could grow whatever you wanted under it. But technically I got it for a marijuana light years ago. I've advanced since then, but it makes a beautiful light on my pond down here. And even this in here, if you lift this hood up, the light itself that's in there, let me see if I can get this out of there without too much trouble. The light that was in there died on me, and so what I did was I went to the Walmart and I bought a very inexpensive little under counter light, and I just glued it in the place where the light is supposed to be. So that's just a $15 or a $12 under counter light that I got from Walmart, and I just stuck it inside that hood, and it does a fine job because this is just a shrimp tank. Even if it wasn't, there's no way anybody looking in that tank would not know that that's not a real aquarium light. So hang on, let me use both hands to do that. Let me put the camera back down. So I just don't spend money on a bunch of stuff that's built for aquariums. Again, all I want them to do is come on and go off. What's more important to me is having a good quality light. I want a good, as full a spectrum as possible. And obviously with this $12 under counter light, that's not what I get in this tank, but this tank isn't the same as my discus tank. I talk about those LED floodlights, and I talk about them as far as their brightness and just the amount of light that they're actually putting on the tank. But they're not cheap floodlights. They're not, they don't just put out a fluorescent light kind of light spectrum. These are pretty close to full spectrum light. They have a color rendering index of 94%. So they're, at least visually, they're 94% similar to natural sunlight. I'm not doing that for my plants because they need all this full spectrum lights. Plants like this will do just fine under fluorescent lighting. That's not an issue at all. But visually, fluorescent lights don't look nearly as good as these lights do. These lights, fluorescent lights are a color rendering index of 80. So they represent 80% similarity to what natural light would look like as far as how bright the colors are and how true the colors are. These are 94% accurate to natural sunlight. So they may be floodlights, but they're made with Cree LEDs. I don't even know if Cree is still around. Like, so many things have changed over the years. But back in the day, Cree was like an industry leader. And so these are just really, really good lights for my aquarium. But they're floodlights. They're $15 a pop. And I've got 6 of them in here. So I still did spend some money on the lighting in this tank. But it's just floodlights I bought at the Home Depot. All right, let me see where I was. I just find the fish-based lighting to be way overpriced. I mean, if you were to replace a simple aquarium hood like in the 10-gallon and you were going to put a new light on that, you pay $30 or $40. It's just a fucking fluorescent light bulb. There's nothing special or magical about it. It's just a fluorescent light bulb that goes over a fish tank. So now obviously if you're buying the whole hood with the plastic and the wiring and everything, but for me, again, I go out and spend $12 on and stick it under there, and I guarantee none of you ever would have known that wasn't a real aquarium light under there. So I'm always looking for ways to save money on things like that. I never buy the stuff that's sold for fishing or the 4 fish tanks. All right, let me see. Oh, thank you, Michael. I'm glad you enjoy them. You're going to try to grow a Nubius with it in your cupboard? You don't need a lot of light to grow a Nubius. No, I never read any fish keeping books. The internet was a thing by the time I started keeping fish. I didn't start keeping fish till about 2010. Maybe 2012, I started getting, more serious about it. But I've always done all my reading and research. I have done a ton of reading over the years, more than I would like to admit. But it's all been online. I don't really read books, at least not those kind of books. If I'm looking for information, I do that online. If I want to enjoy a story and, read a book, I do read books. I just don't read information. Like, I'm not going to go through a fish book about fish diseases and stuff. I'll just go online and find the information I need, True. Don't forget, I like the mushrooms. I just keep realizing how much mushrooms are on me. I'm just sitting here talking away like my brain's on automatic. Meanwhile, I'm off playing with the fucking fairies somewhere. Heavyweight, how are you? All right, everybody, let's make a batch of mushroom tea. Now, for legal purposes, I'm going to say that you can use whatever mushroom
of your choice. And you can all speculate as to what kind I'm using. I think there's a difference between me drinking tea on camera versus demonstrating how to manufacture it. I don't know if that's a technical difference or not, but I've talked about it enough times and how to do it. Tonight I'm gonna show you, and I'm not going to be able to stress enough how important the lemon juice is. That is an absolutely critical part of the process. All right, this is what I'm starting with. That is the stem of the cap that I ate before the live stream started. This was like a 2.5 gram mushroom, so I'd cut it in half during the drying process because it was taking forever. I figured if I opened up, separated it, it would just dry faster. So we already ate the first half of it. This weighs 0.9 grams, and so it's almost a gram. And we are going to turn it into more or less powder. But before I do that, I'm going to prep my steeping cup with some lemon juice. And I don't know if you can see how much lemon juice I put in there, but it's not a lot. The goal is going to be that we're going to get the mushroom powder sort of wet and pasty. It doesn't have to be swimming in lemon juice. All right, let me plug this in. Let me find a plug to plug this into. All right. I should probably try breaking it up a little bit first. Got wedged under the blade. Phew, that stinks. I don't know why this thing's making that weird screaming noise. All right, so now that we have it like that, can you see that? I don't know if I'm holding it in the right spot. Now we're going to dump it into the lemon juice. And normally I would get a little knife and spread it around, but I actually use kind of a lot of lemon juice, and this is sort of swimming in lemon juice. So that's it. Just give it a moment or two in the lemon juice. All it's got to do is absorb some acid, and the acid binds with the psilocybin and prevents it from oxidizing. If you do not use the lemon juice, the psilocybin will soak into the water along with the enzymes in the mushroom, and it will immediately begin oxidizing, and your whole glass of mushroom tea will turn blue and be ruined. It won't have any potency at all when it turns blue like that. So the lemon juice that is in there is going to stop it from turning blue as we let it soak. So let me go put some water in that, and then we're going to let it sit for about 20-25 minutes, and then we'll strain it off through a coffee strainer. And I will have some mushroom tea. It's as simple as that. And that's about all water you need. You don't need a lot. Just let it soak for about 20 minutes. And I have already got my strainer ready to go. Let me go put this back in the refrigerator. This is a refrigerated item. Actually, well, it's refrigerated after you open it. When you buy it at the store, it's not in a refrigerator. It took me forever to find this damn thing. I finally had to ask. It was down in the produce section, which makes sense once I thought about it. But I was thinking of a little plastic bottle of orange juice. Lemon juice. I wasn't thinking of like buying an actual lemon. But if you want to find the little plastic bottles of lemon juice, they're in the aisle where all the lemons are down in the produce section. So now you know, and so do I. All right.
Keep it fishing. 1979. I was 8 years old. Four kilos of crushed coral. Nice. Oh, thank you, Fish and Football. I always appreciate when I hear somebody tells me they've been inspired by my tanks and whatnot. You know, my mom tells me that we had a fish tank when I was a kid that my dad kept for a while, and she said he kind of lost interest after a year or so and just broke it all down, got rid of the fish, and that was it. I have no recollection at all of ever having a fish tank when I was a kid. We had a fish bowl for a very little while, the traditional Tom and Jerry goldfish bowl with the carnival goldfish in it. And I killed that one day. I was 6 or 7. I was trying to help out, and the fucking goldfish water was so dirty and stinky and nasty. I thought I would help clean it, and so I put some dish soap in the water for it, which did not help. That's my first fish I've ever killed when I was 7 or 6 or something. But as far as I could tell, it was going to die soon anyway if somebody didn't change that fucking gross ass tank it was sitting in. I guess my mom just got tired of doing it. But yeah, that's my only memory of any kind of fish tank when I was a kid. But my mom insists my dad had a whole tropical aquarium set up in the living room, and I no recollection of it. I bet a terrapin was a king Koopa in the pond. A lot of people have that issue with trying to keep koi outside, the herons or kingfishers, all kinds of different predatory animals. I've had raccoons out in my pond before, so you never know what's going to get in there and get your fish. Utopia gummies? No, I've never heard of them. And I don't like gummies. So I wouldn't have sought them out, whatever they are. Marijuana, the chemicals you want in marijuana are not water soluble, so you can't make tea out of marijuana. If you do make tea out of marijuana, you have to infuse either a cream, a fatty based substance like milk or something. You could make the marijuana into that and then use the milk in the tea, or you could do a sugar base like honey, and you could infuse the marijuana into the honey, and then you could use the honey in your tea. But you can't just make tea out of marijuana. You doesn't do shit. It's not water soluble. That's why bong hits get us high. All of the tar and ash and stuff does get caught in the water, but all the good chemicals you want are not water soluble. They just go right through with the bubbles, and you inhale all the good stuff, while a lot of shit gets trapped in the water that you don't want. So don't waste your weed trying to make tea out of it. It ain't the same. Psilocybin is water soluble, so that's why just making simple mushroom tea works. You actually do extract all that psilocybin right into the water, and when you drink it, it's already dissolved in water, so it goes right into your bloodstream. And you also don't get any of the stomach issues you get with physically eating mushrooms. You don't have to digest anything. It's just smooth and pleasant. There's no stomach issues. First time I ever made mushroom tea, I never look back. I'll never eat mushrooms again unless I have to. Screw that. No, never had a pet turtle. I did find a little baby snapping turtle when I was a kid, and I took it home and had no idea how to care for it, and it died. I thought it was going to stay buried in the mud, like where I found it. I found it in the late autumn, about this time of year. It was already buried for hibernating, but I didn't know that. So I put it in a tank in my bedroom, and I put it, I made mud and stuff in there for it to bury in. And it never came unburied in the spring. So I guess my warm bedroom was probably not the best place to keep it for hibernation. Some cow type. Well, the mushrooms I have are golden teacher, And that's probably the most common. So when you see those little brown mushrooms that come up on the cow patties or whatever, that's probably golden teacher. That's probably what I'm making my tea out of tonight. Yeah, when it's not dinner time, they all tend to migrate down and stay, kind of hidden in the bushes down there. So usually by the end of the live stream, it looks like I'm sitting in front of a tropical garden tank, but it doesn't look like it's got any fish in it. All right, good night, Michael. Oh, that sounds so nasty, Art. Does it grow in your shower drain? No, it doesn't work that way, fish and football. If you don't eat your tatties. All right, Dade. Thanks for hanging out. It's how can you have your pudding if you don't eat your meat? That's what they say. And I was an adult before I even really understood the whole difference between the pudding and meat, because I'm an American and we have something that we call pudding that is very specifically a gelatinous type dessert or whatever. It took me till adulthood to realize that pudding anywhere else could be all sorts of stuff. Now we do have stuff like rice pudding and bread pudding, but those things all have a specific name because they're not pudding. It's bread pudding or it's rice pudding. If you say pudding, anybody in America is going to think of like the creamy, smooth, snack pack pudding cups or whatever. So yeah, I was an adult before I really understood the whole like meat versus, your pudding for dessert or whatever. I was thinking about something about Pink Floyd today that had me laughing. And I always talk about how all the years I've been listening to Pink Floyd and the thousands of times I've listened to The Wall. This was like a couple of weeks ago. I was on mushrooms, and so I'm, sort of thinking about the world differently. But I'm not kidding. For as iconic as, hang on a minute, I got stuff on my lip. For as iconic as Comfortably Numb is, and for as much as I've listened to that song and as awesome as that song is, while listening to it, it never occurred to me until the other night when I was on mushrooms and I was just hearing it differently and just sort of thinking about it differently. The part of the song where he's saying, I'll need a bit of information first. Can you tell me where it hurts? Then the response is like, there is no pain, you are receding. I never realized that was the doctor and Pink. It was all just Pink, and like it was just all the same vocals in my mind until the other night when I was tripping listening to it. I was like, wait a minute, this is someone, this is a two-way back and forth. One person is singing, then the response is from the other person. I always knew that, but it just never really clicked for me like that, and it was just weird to find again after all these years of listening to this album. Like I heard it in a different way all of a sudden again. Again, I always understood what was happening there, but it just wasn't the same as like, oh, it's two people. It was just kind of weird. Maybe you had to be there. Maybe you had to be on mushrooms. All right. Mince pies. My wife just made a cottage pie, which was like, it's similar to shepherd's pie, but shepherd's pie is made with lamb and this was made with ground beef. And oh my fucking God, was this stuff good. I've been begging her to make it again, but she made it with ground beef that we got from the Miller's Meat Market, which like they grow their own beef and grind it out back kind of place. So we're going to go get our ground beef from there again, and she's going to make another one. Man, that was good. Would you learn about pudding on St. Patrick's Day? Or that mince pie wasn't actually pie? The Piper at the Gates of Dawn is Pink Floyd's first album, I believe. OXO cubes? I don't know what that is. Yeah, I do too. Like, like you just see it completely differently. And then you can't not see it that way once you realize it. And again, I've always understood it. I've seen the movie a bunch of times, and like I understand that what's going on. A doctor's asking him, but like it just never really in the song, as you're sort of having, visualizations or whatever while you're listening to the music. Like it just never occurred to me. I had a similar one. This was maybe 10 years ago, so quite some time ago, but still long after I'd been listening to The Wall. And it's the part where the phone operator keeps saying, like, this is the United States calling. Are we reaching? And the phone keeps going dead and whatever. I never really got what that was about. Like, it's Pink, he's on the road, he's traveling, he's away from his wife, he's calling home back to England because he's in America, and some dude is answering the phone, and like that, like it just that clicked for me about 10 years ago. I was like, oh shit, this is about him personally and his wife and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not necessarily going to say I'm the sharpest on the uptake, but there's a lot going on in that whole album for you to just spend some time really digesting that album. And again, I've been listening to it since 1981, and I'm still picking new things up out of it. So I have to laugh at myself over stuff like that, though. Power cut. What do you mean, Zini? Back. Oh, I see what you're saying, Fish and Football. I knew that the Piper at the Gates of Dawn was a reference to something. I didn't know what it was actually from. But when I hear that, I just think of Pink Floyd's first album. I'm not a big fan of Piper either. I know it's almost sacrilege to be a Pink Floyd fan and say stuff like that. But a lot of their early work, I'm just not a huge fan of. Some of it was amazing. But as I've said many times, listening to like an album like Ummagumma, it's just fucking banger after banger after banger. And then suddenly it's 20 minutes of noise. And then it goes right back into awesome music for the end of the album. And I can just never get through the noise part. Why is that there? Like, this would be such an amazing album if you just took that middle 20 minutes of noise out. And it was them on drugs and experimenting and, whatever. It's like listening to fucking jazz music where everybody's playing something different. So, yeah. Oh, it's about Pan the Piper. Yeah, I always assumed that. I don't know if Pink Floyd has a best album. I think of the top four, like the ruling four, which are like the four greatest albums ever made, is Animals, Wish You Were Here, Dark Side, and The Wall. But I do listen to the other stuff. I do listen to Ummagumma. I listen to metal occasionally. No, Saucer Full of Secrets is the one. That Saucer Full of Secrets is their first one. And that's one of those ones that I listen to some of it, but I skip over stuff too. Piper at the Gates of Dawn came later. And what is the one? Obscured by Clouds. I actually listen to Obscured by Clouds a lot. And I finally understand why that one stands out as just a really good album, because all of it is a good album. It's all listenable. All their other early stuff always has some huge chunk of obnoxious experimental shit where if they're banging on fucking instruments, it's just a din for 20 minutes and they're calling it music. It's screeching and screaming and it's just fucking noise. Obscured by Clouds was actually a soundtrack to a movie. So it's got to be enjoyable all the way through. Maybe after that, they got this idea like, what if we made an album that people wanted to listen to? And that's when they started moving into their, Animals and Wish You Were Here sort of phase. And they actually started making good music where everybody wanted to listen to the whole album rather than some of the album, but I'll leave that other shit for somebody else. But Obscured by Clouds is actually a really good older Pink Floyd album. And the whole thing is just listenable. It's just an enjoyable album, but it was for a movie. That's why. All right. No, Animals. I listen to Animals all the time. I listen to Animals, Dark Side, Wish You Were Here, and The Wall. And I'm also a fan of The Final Cut. I know it's not a really popular album. It's kind of bleak. It's for when I'm in a very melancholy mood. I got to be in the right mood to listen to Final Cut. But Final Cut's a really good album. Again, their earlier stuff, I like it. Some of the stuff on there is just fucking fantastic. And then some of it is just like, what the fuck are you guys doing? Like, how much acid did you take? I just don't know why it's in there. So I haven't listened to Adam Hart Mother in a long time either. And I'm going to guess I'll listen to that tonight. I used to have that one on vinyl. And I remember I just never really listened to it. And so when I'm sitting over in my, den over there thinking about what I want to listen to, I never think about Adam Hart Mother because I always just sort of dismiss that. Oh, that was that album you had when you were a kid. You never listened to it. I have listened to it as an adult, and I don't remember anything about it particularly striking. But I will give that one a listen to again. Oh, I always listen to headphones now. Let me see what actual songs. We also have to pour off my tea too. Hang on a second here. Adam Hart Mother. So if you don't know Adam Hart Mother, it's the Pink Floyd album that's got the cow on the front of it. That's Adam Hart Mother. So I want to see if I recognize any of the songs on it. Summer. Let's see. Father's Shout. If. Summer 68 and Fat Old Son. So it's only got 4 songs on the whole album. Yeah, I'll give that a listen to tonight. And I'm guessing it's going to be on par for old Pink Floyd, where it's going to have several bangers, but there's going to be a 8-minute stretch where they're just clanging on shit and screeching and making noises and doing weird stuff with synthesizers and the 70s. Everybody thinks the 60s were the decade. The 70s were the fucking crazy decade, not the 60s. We're just pouring this through a coffee filter. There's nothing really for you to be able to need to see. And we'll just let it drain off, and you can probably already tell the water's like cloudy. That's what you want to see. You don't want to see blue. You want to see clear with sort of a cloudiness to it. So we'll let that drip drain. And when it's done dripping, I'll wring the filter and everything out. I'll squeeze every last drop of juice out of that. And I'm going to go upstairs real quick and grab my flavoring. I put one of those, squirt bottles of flavoring in there to make it taste a little less like ass. So, well, I just make it taste like a different kind of ass. I use the blue raspberry flavoring, and I really don't like blue raspberry, so that's deliberately why I use the flavoring I don't particularly like. But just a little squirt of that will take away all that mushroomy flavor. All right, let me have a drink of actual tea here real quickly. Oh, I never showed you my bud either. So I told you earlier, I cut the very bottom lowest branch off. I'm going to harvest it tomorrow, but yesterday I cut the lowest branch off, and that's what I've got left of it. All the rest has been rolled into joints. So that's Super Silver Haze. And that was the very bottom branch. This is the very top of the plant. Isn't that sick looking? That's a little more broader view of the bud. So that's the very, very top of the plant. Dank. So that was this, sort of. This looks just as good, but not quite, because again, this was the very bottom branch. So once I actually get that drying and curing, like, I'm finally going to be back into having some good weed. Speaking of which, let me grab one of those joints while I'm out here too. I rolled 3 of them today, or we already smoked one, so I'll work on another. All right, we're pretty much done dripping. So that'll get thrown away. That gets rinsed out. And that is my finished product. Cloudy, but not blue. You don't want to see blue. If you see it starting to turn blue, hurry up and drink it. If you sit there and watch it turn blue, like, that bluing is all your psilocybin oxidizing and becoming useless. Now, if you do this, you can magically turn it blue again. So much easier than eating mushroom. Takes a little longer to prep it, but my God, is it worth it. Hell, honestly, if I had if I had started chewing on that mushroom when I started that process, I'd probably still be picking bits of it out of my teeth anyway. So did I really waste any time? So 10 of 10. It's gonna be a late night for me tonight. All right. All right, Iceman, I'll say goodnight if you're still there. So if you like the album with What's Up John on it, that's the final cut. That's the last album Pink Floyd did together as a complete band before Roger Waters split. That came after The Wall. It's a fucking fantastic album. It's a very depressing kind of album. It's very melancholy, and it's definitely, if you want to really dig into it, it's very clearly Roger Waters working through psychological, issues with his loss of his father and all that kind of stuff. It's very political, it's all 1980s European politics and stuff like that. It's very anti-war. It's not a fun album. I would never put this album on at a party, but it's a really good album if you're in the right mood for it. Yeah. Little tiny piece of weed sucked through that filter somehow. Oh, and I was hoping you were the one there watching it. So too late now. It's already down the hatch. I can just taste ground seed in all of these fucking joints. I don't know how the flavor got spread throughout my whole thing of weed, but I swear every one of these joints I rolled has a flavor of fucking seed in it. It's nasty. Any tobacco? Fuck no, I don't smoke tobacco. And if I did, I wouldn't blaspheme on a joint by putting tobacco in with weed. That's terrible. I've heard of people doing that. No, just don't do that. You can put all the goddamn pineapple you want on your pizza, but don't mix tobacco with marijuana. I don't think a lot of people in America even know what a spliff actually is. A lot of people use the term spliff just sort of interchangeable with a joint. I feel a little guilty calling these joints because technically they're cones. But I'm not going to sit here and talk about the cone that I'm smoking or whatever. I might, if I'm talking about the process of packing them or preparing them or whatever, I might say I was packing up some cones. I'm not going to say I was rolling the joint if I was packing a cone. But I don't say like, oh, I'm going to smoke a cone. It's a joint. Once it's in my fingers and I'm smoking it, it's just a joint, I don't know about spliffs though. As far as I understand, if what I remember a spliff to be is correct, is it's almost like a giant cone. It's 8 inches long. It's just huge. You put like a quarter ounce of weed in the thing. Like that's what a spliff is to me. Looks like a rolled up newspaper. Ja Rastafari. Let me see what the all-powerful Google has to say about what a spliff is. Oh, a spliff is a cigarette containing both cannabis and tobacco. While it's often used interchangeably with joint, the term specifically refers to a mixture of cannabis and tobacco, which is common in many parts of Europe. The word spliff originated in the West Indies and is used in various cultures to describe this type of cannabis cigarette, which can also include a filter or crutch at one end. Well, there you go. I just learned something new. I had no idea what a spliff was. I thought a spliff was just a giant size cone-like joint or whatever. So no, I don't think a lot of people in America do the heinous crime of mixing their weed with tobacco. It's just, I've never known anybody in my life that has ever done that. I've heard a lot of people say, in Europe they do it and they talk about it like it's all fancy, but I've never had anybody actually consider doing it. which always I found kind of odd. If it's so fancy, then why aren't you doing it? You know. Yeah, I've never heard of it being. I always thought of the mixing weed and tobacco. In my mind, that was always like in a pipe or a bowl, and you would use like more of like a pipe type tobacco or something like that. Or like if you were smoking out of a hookah, you can't really smoke weed properly out of a hookah. You got to have those weird blocks of tobacco. But if you mix that with weed, you could, a lot of times it mixed with opium. I never thought about rolling like weed and tobacco in a joint before. That sounds fucking so hideous. Did I already take it upstairs? I did not take it upstairs. Anna, in answer to your question, why it looked blue, it looked blue because I don't like the flavor of mushrooms, and so I put a little bit of blue raspberry, and it's got electrolytes. That's what plants crave. So, mystery solved. Oh, speaking of blue mysteries, was anybody familiar with the blue dogs of Chernobyl? There's organizations out there that have been studying the animals and the wildlife and whatnot around Chernobyl to see what the effects this radiation's been having on them. And there's one particular organization that is following all of the dogs. A lot of people that evacuated just assumed they were going to be coming back home in a day or two, and they left their dogs behind. And of course, no one ever came back. And so all these dogs just became feral. And a few months ago, they found several of them that had this strange blue coloration to their fur. And it was a big mystery. It made its way around the internet, etc. But they have discovered the cause of the blue. Once they actually captured one of the dogs and analyzed its fur, there is a porta pot in the area that's leaking its blue juice, and dogs are going to dog, and they're rolling around in the porta potty juice. So all the world was wondering about the blue haired dog. It's stained with porta pot juice. That's why it's blue. God, it's an awesome world that we live in. All right, let me see where I was. And of course, if you don't know me, if you haven't watched my channel, I don't give a shit what you want to do. If you want to mix weed and tobacco together and stuff it up your nose, have fun. If that's how you enjoy it, I don't care. I'm just ragging on it because I don't like it personally or whatever. I'm just busting people's chops. If you want to smoke weed and tobacco together, then go ahead. But that's not my thing. Well, the song "Pass the Dutchie" that was actually a song about hungry people, and in Europe they call a Dutch oven a Dutchie or whatever, and so "Pass the Dutchie" to the left-hand side. It was modeled after a reggae song about passing a chalice, which is like a bong. But they changed it to Dutchie because it was 13-year-old kids singing it, and it was in England, and they didn't think, children singing about weed would have been a good idea. And so they changed it to Pass the Dutchie and made it all about hungry people and sharing your food and all that kind of stuff. A much misunderstood song. Moke, interesting. Chop makes sense. You're chopping it up, you're mixing it together or whatever. Yeah, well, I live out in the woods, so I'm not too worried about anybody smelling it. Yeah, that's the weed I used to get back in the day. Just, you'd squeeze a bud and like 40 seeds would come out of every bud. And you'd look at what was left, and it was like the skeleton of a bud where all the seeds were gone. I remember that weed. Yep, Mexican brickweed. That was a little different, but on the same category of quality. Yeah, I've been growing my own weed for 20 years now. So even before that, I was buying like BC nugs and stuff like that. Where I used to live in Arbutus, I got weed and it was, full of stems and seeds and all that kind of stuff. And then when I moved out here, suddenly you couldn't find just a bag of weed anymore. Instead of paying like $20 for an eighth, I was suddenly paying $50 for an eighth. But it was the BC nugs or Jack Herrera or whatever they were calling it, whether it was really that or not, I don't know. AK-47s was really popular around that time. I got tons of AK-47s over the years. And then in 2007, roughly, I started growing it myself, and I never looked back. I grow my own. Well, the dogs may still be radioactive, but their fur's not blue from anything like the genetic changes or anything like that. It was literally just blue dye from rolling around in the porta pot juice. Oh, let's see. Spirit in the Sky. Norman Greenbaum. The only song anybody ever knows from Norman Greenbaum is The Spirit in the Sky. Have you ever heard Nina Hagen's version of Spirit in the Sky? Who does, I'm thinking of the Violent Femmes, Jesus Walking on the Water, Jesus Flying in the Sky. Violent Femmes does a good Jesus song. All right, I'm all caught up. I've got to think of what the name of that song is now. That's going to drive me crazy. It's called Jesus Walking on the Water. All right. I can hear it in my head. I just didn't know what the actual title of it was, but it's Jesus Walking on the Water. Violent Femmes is another good band. If you're not already familiar with them, you should check out the Violent Femmes. One of the darkest songs ever is a Violent Femmes song about murdering your children. But it's such a good song. It's called the Country Death Song. If you're into bleak darkness, listen to Violent Femmes' Country Death Song. I'm not kidding about it being a good song. It really is actually a really good song. I listen to it often, but it's dark. All right, everybody, we are up in first position. It doesn't mean we're going to go just yet, but I am going to start winding down here shortly. I've already felt like this whole live stream, I'm right on the edge of where like much more mushrooms than this, and I probably wouldn't want to be on a live stream. And I just drank about the equivalent of what I already got in me. So I just kind of doubled up my mushroom dosage. And I probably want to go before that starts kicking in. Or maybe I'll go when it starts kicking in. We'll play that one by ear. Actually, you know what? Let me take a hit of nicotine or two before I start working on this joint again. Well, there's two secrets to how I get my Crips to grow so well. I don't know if you've been here long enough to have been around the room, but you can see over here, that tank is full of Crips. That's my real tank full of Crips. The ones, well, I guess if you were to take that and put it in a 55, that would be pretty much on par with what's going on over there. This is just a 125 I was sitting in front of. And so it looks a little more spacious, but that's still a lot of damn Crips in that 125. Either way, a lot of light. I know they're a low light plant, but they can also adapt to a lot of light. And a lot of light in this case is still absolute peanuts compared to sunlight. So if this was real crypt out in the world and it was in a part of the river or something where it got an hour of full sunlight and the rest of the day was just kind of bright shade or indirect light, that would still be way more light than this gets. So it can tolerate
a lot of light compared to what you would typically think about with aquarium lighting. I tend to overlight. That's a shop light on there, not an aquarium light. And so the highlighting, and I'm not shy about nutrients and stuff like that. I don't do water changes frequently. I let the nitrate build up, and the phosphates and stuff in the tank are there. And I also have a planted substrate. And the final ingredient is patience. That's, I don't know when the last time I cut that out of there was, but I thin it out every now and again. It grows back within several months. But that's because I've spent years establishing a massive root system through that whole tank. When I pull stuff out of there, you'd be amazed at the amount of roots that come out with the stuff that I pull out. And so it's just been years and years of growing. The same with that giant Nubius I've got behind me. I often get asked, about that. It's kind of hard to see with the bright light shining on it, but that huge plant growing up and out of the tank, that's a Nubius. And likewise, it just gets a lot of light. That actually gets too much light. It burns the leaves up when they get too close to it. And it's just years and years of me not doing anything to it, just leaving it alone and letting it grow. If you're a patient person, and I'm not when it comes to a lot of things, but there are other things that I can just will wait. I garden, so I often put stuff in the ground. Like we just planted bulbs the other day that we won't see till next summer. That's normal. I plant plants that I won't see flowers for 2 or 3 years before I'll see a flower off of them. So putting plants in fish tanks and then just letting them do their thing for 9 months before I think about them again is pretty normal for me. And so just having that kind of patience in the aquarium hobby, again, nothing good ever happens fast in the aquarium hobby. It just takes a long time for tanks to grow in and become thick and lush and whatnot. You just got to leave them alone, not mess with them too much, and provide them with all of the stuff they need. Give them plenty of lighting, plenty of nutrients, and just leave them, let them do their thing, and they'll grow in like that. All right, I'm missing some comments here. All right, let me see what we're saying here. What's rocking this boat? Nothing. No, I do not believe that fish can get downs. That's a chromosomal disorder, and fish don't have the same chromosomes as us, or at least not all of the same chromosomes. Let me double check that. You never know, because we do share a lot of genetics with a lot of animals on this planet. No, fish cannot have Down syndrome because it is a human condition caused by a specific genetic structure, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, I was right. I just wanted to double check. Remember, everybody, I hope you learn from me when I do stuff like that. I say something because I'm pretty sure of it, but then I'm not 100% sure of that. So let me double check before I go saying things. It just takes a moment. I reaffirmed that, yes, I was right, and so that's fine. I felt fairly confident saying that. I thought that was a specifically human condition. But I could be wrong. I don't know everything. So I checked. I might not sing to them, but I definitely play music for them. Fish Tropic, how are you? Crush that like button. If you were asking what this is, that is my peace lily. I saw it on the Discord. I don't look at it often, but Ark had tagged me in something. And I did see, I don't remember who it was. I think it was one of the Mikes had posted asking whether or not his fish store had sold him a peace lily, which is this, in lieu of what was labeled as an Anubias. And I could understand somebody making that sort of mistake if they saw that. But secret in the fish keeping hobby that a lot of people don't tell you is that there are two types of sword plants. Oh, the spiky one. This is a new one I just got recently. That is a Zini said it's a dragon tree. I brought it under the name of Dracenia. I've transplanted it. It was in a little tiny 3-inch planter, but it was on clearance for $1, and it needs moist conditions and high humidity and all that. And so I got it. They had some really big ones. So this is just a tiny little one. It's just getting started. So eventually that'll probably be in a planter on the floor next to the tank. But that's my new addition, if that's what you were asking about. Love that thing. And that is also a fairly new addition. I don't even know what this is. My wife didn't know what to do with it in the kitchen. And she said, again, it likes moisture and high humidity. Asked if I had room for it. And I was like, sure, I'll put it down there. So this will probably go back out in the yard next summer. You can see it's adjusting to the different lighting and, whatnot. The edges are getting a little burned up. It's another low light plant. I do have it right on the edge of where this shines, but this is a really high intensity LED. It puts out 22,000 lumens. I know lumens are for humans, and we can't go by, what the plants see, but just to put it in perspective, one of these spotlights down there at full crank puts out about 1,100 lumens. This has 2 LEDs, and each one puts out 11,000 lumens. So I got 22,000 lumens coming out of that LED when it's on. It's a full 200 watt LED, and that's 200 watt at the wall. That's not equivalent of 200 watts. Is actual 200 watts of LED. It's a lot of light. All right, Mike. So anyway, back to what I was saying with I've not only thought about being a teacher. When I was in massage school, they practically begged me to come back as an instructor after I left. In fact, my instructor had me, I don't know how well this went over with the rest of my class, but he actually had me instruct the class one day just to try to whet my appetite for being the instructor and whatnot. And so I was a student in the class, yet I taught the class for a day in my massage school. And when I was graduating and leaving and everything, the administrators, everybody asked me to come back and get involved in the teaching program. And I didn't, obviously. I was drinking real heavy back then. My alcoholic days were hard on me, and there's no way I could have been a teacher. But yeah, I've thought about being a teacher. The noblest of professions, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, we do that all the time. We put house plants out. Again, I live in the woods, so I don't get a lot of sun. And so low light house plants do well as long as the temperatures are okay out in our yard. We have house plants all over the place outside. And then in the winter, we got to bring them in when the temperatures get too cold. But anyway, in the aquarium hobby, you have Amazon swords, and then you have Brazilian swords. Anything that is labeled as an Amazon sword can be fully submerged. It can live its whole entire life completely underwater. The plants that are sold as Brazilian swords are supposed to be grown emergent. The tops of the leaves are supposed to be out of the water, but the root and everything can be down in your aquarium. But the secret is a Brazilian sword is a peace lily. And when you're paying $30 for some little Brazilian sword in your aquarium shop, you can go to the Walmart and buy a peace lily like that for $15. So a peace lily, or a Brazilian sword is a peace lily. And there's a lot of different species of peace lilies or whatever, but they have to be grown emergent. You can't have a peace lily fully underwater in your tank or it'll die. As long as you got well oxygenated water, and the roots can flow into the well oxygenated water, they'll do great emergent. There's some disco party lights. I could always put like those plant heaters, the little pot heaters underneath and set them all on plant heaters. Build little greenhouses over top of each one. Even these cones I pack so tight I can barely hit on the damn things. I got to lighten up on how tight I pack my weed. All right, everybody. I can't think of any final thoughts, especially anything that has to do with the aquarium hobby. If anybody has any ideas or wants to hear story time about anything, my brain's fucking reeling. So now would be a good time to hit me up. You never know what you'll get. But I am going to be winding down here pretty soon. I can feel that second wave of mushrooms starting to roll on to me. It's going to start getting a lot more intense here pretty soon. God damn it, it's hard to hit on. All right, Anna, thanks for stopping by. Sorry you missed the tea demonstration. It's exactly the way I've explained it. If you actually have any questions about it or whatever, you can always ask me and I can go over it again. It's easy enough. Um, 20 to 30 minutes, I think, is enough. I steeped some last night and I did it like really quickly. I only let it steep for about 10 minutes. And I got a pretty good, ride out of it, but it didn't seem like as much as I should have gotten for the amount of tea I made. So I don't think maybe that was quite long enough. But every time I've let it sit for 20 minutes or so versus like an hour, there doesn't seem to be much difference. So I think that 20-minute point is about where it's gotten everything out that it's going to get out. But remember, I grind my stuff into like almost a powder before I make it into the tea. If you're just breaking it up into chunks, I'd let it steep a lot longer if the pieces are bigger. But if you've got it in like a fine powder or really finely ground, 20 minutes seems to be good. But remember, grind it and then straight into lemon juice and let it sit in the lemon juice for a minute or two and then add your water. It's got to go into that lemon juice. If you mix lemon juice with the water, that's probably fine too, but I like to just play it safe and go straight into the lemon juice, let it sit for a minute, and then put the water in, then let it sit for 20 minutes. Are you back on your nocturnal schedule tonight, Zini? Can I expect to be hanging out later, or are you calling it a night now? I know it's already the wee hours over there for you and your future person. Hell, you're already well into Saturday. I still got an hour and a half, almost 2 hours. Damn it, I just ashed on my floor. Oh well. All right, I think it's time to start winding down and getting out of here. So, well, let me know if you're going to be up. Like I said, I'm still got a long way to go. I'm just getting started on that whole second wave. So I got another 6 hours ahead of me. I don't know if I'll be awake for all of that. Like I said, I can easily go to sleep while I'm still tripping a little bit. But I'm not going to waste my whole ride. I'll definitely get through the peak of it and be well onto the backside of it before I'm ready to call it a night. All right, now we get to the fucking head spinning part. All right, well, don't let me keep you up then. If you got to try to do a daytime schedule and it's already 3:30 in the morning for you. So on that note, I'm going to say goodnight, everybody. I hope you all had a good time. I know I have. And we'll see you guys again on Sunday. So long, and thanks for all the fish. Good night.